Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Bellatrix Lestrange is one of the most terrifying, and yet strangely captivating figures in the Harry Potter universe. She's often viewed one-dimensionally based on the surface-level impressions from the films. But behind that dark image lies something far more complex. Today, we'll unravel the most common myths about Bellatrix and find out what's true and what's pure fiction. Enjoy the video. Number 1. She wasn't insane. Bellatrix is often labelled as crazy, and to be fair, her reputation supports that view. But behind her eccentric exterior was cold, calculated intent. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she did it with purpose. When Voldemort made her one of his most trusted allies, he knew who he was counting on. Bellatrix embraced his ideology to the very last drop of blood, willingly participating in his most brutal schemes. No hesitation, no remorse. Number 2. She was a dueling master. Many Death Eaters are portrayed as menacing in appearance but clumsy in combat, like magical stormtroopers. But Bellatrix was the exception. Her dueling skills were truly extraordinary. The films leave much out, but in the books, she fought Hermione, Ginny, and Luna at the same time, and held her ground. She not only remained composed in battle, but could take on multiple powerful opponents at once. Number 3, she wasn't beautiful. The on-screen Bellatrix, portrayed by Helena Bonham Carter, is charismatic, even attractive in a wild way. But the Bellatrix from the books is quite different. After 15 years in Azkaban, her face became gaunt, her features sharp and haunting. Imprisonment and the constant presence of Dementors took their toll. Once a woman of noble lineage accustomed to luxury, she turned into the embodiment of fear, not just in her nature, but in her appearance. Number 4, she had a daughter. Those who only know the original books or films might not realize that Bellatrix had a child, and the father wasn't Rodolphus Lestrange, it was the Dark Lord himself. In the play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, it's revealed that between the events of Order of the Phoenix and the end of Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix gave birth to a girl named Delphi, the product of her utter devotion to Voldemort. Number 5. She was one of the few women among the Death Eaters. At first glance, it may seem like there were plenty of women among the Death Eaters, but that's not true. In canon, only 2 women officially held the title, Bellatrix and Alecto Caro. Even her sister Narcissa was not a formal member. Bellatrix had to rise through the ranks in a male-dominated, violent world, proving her strength and loyalty far more ruthlessly than most. Number 6, Voldemort wasn't her only attachment. Yes, her feelings for Voldemort were undeniable, but that doesn't mean she was incapable of other forms of attachment. One surprising example? The house elf Kreacher. Bellatrix was kind to him, a rare thing among wizards of her kind. Kreacher even kept a photo of Bellatrix by his bed, a clear sign of the affection she showed him, a rare and oddly human touch to her otherwise fearsome character. Number 7, she knew the truth about Voldemort's bloodline and accepted it. The Dark Lord built his ideology on pure blood supremacy, despite being a half-blood himself. Many cite this as proof of his hypocrisy, but for Bellatrix it simply didn't matter. She knew the truth. But her loyalty was so deep that his heritage held no weight. She followed him not because of blood status, but because of power and belief. Number 8, she didn't attend Hogwarts with Snape. Many fans assume Bellatrix and Severus Snape were classmates. That's not the case. Bellatrix was born in 1951 and started at Hogwarts in 1962. Snape entered in 1971, so they didn't even overlap during their school years. Their only common ground was Slytherin House, and, later, their allegiance to the Dark Lord. There was never a school friendship between them. Number 1, she is not insane. Number 2, she is skilled in combat. Number 3, she is not that beautiful. Number 4, she has children. Number 5, she is one of the few female Death Eaters. Number 6, Voldemort is not her only love. Number 7, she didn't care about Voldemort's blood status. Number 8, she wasn't Snape's classmate. Number 9, Bellatrix never repented for her crimes. Bellatrix Lestrange never said sorry, not once, not for the screams, not for the blood, not even for the madness she left behind. Some fans imagine she felt regret, that maybe in her final breath she saw the truth. But she didn't. There was no moment of doubt, no flicker of guilt. Bellatrix died exactly as she lived, laughing. She was proud of her crimes. She celebrated them. Torturing the Longbottoms wasn't duty, it was pleasure, a gift to Voldemort. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she cried in court. No fear, only pride. She didn't change, not even at the end. In the Battle of Hogwarts, she faced Molly Weasley like a predator, smiling, taunting. "What will happen to your children when I've killed you?" she hissed. No mercy, no hesitation. She thought she was unstoppable, untouchable. Even when Molly struck her down, Bellatrix didn't beg, didn't scream, just shock, then silence. That was it. No redemption, no last words. She never saw herself as a villain, never questioned the pain she caused. Every curse was justice in her eyes. Every scream was proof of loyalty. Bellatrix didn't fall. She burned, and she loved the fire too much to ever look back. Number 10, Bellatrix was not a typical Azkaban prisoner. Bellatrix Lestrange was never just a prisoner, not in Azkaban, not anywhere. Others cried, others went mad. She thrived in darkness, in cold, in silence. She waited. Azkaban shattered minds. The Dementors devoured hope. Inmates faded, forgotten, but not her. When she escaped, she didn't stumble, she didn't weep. She laughed, wild, proud, unbroken. Harry saw her in Order of the Phoenix, pale, thin, eyes burning, but her voice strong. She didn't whisper. She declared, "The Dark Lord will rise again." Not a whimper, a vow. Years in Azkaban didn't crush her. They proved her. Others begged for mercy. She stood taller. Prison was her badge. Her scars, medals. She hadn't betrayed him. That was all that mattered. She waited in the dark for his return. Not because she had to, because she believed. That belief fed her, kept her sane. When others screamed, she smiled. When others forgot, she remembered. And when Voldemort returned, she rose. Not like a ghost, like a weapon. Hollow-cheeked, but burning. Her first word. Master. Her voice cracked, but her loyalty blazed. Bellatrix wasn't just a survivor. She was a fanatic in chains, and even Azkaban couldn't silence the storm inside her. Number 11, Bellatrix did not respect Severus Snape. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't respect Severus Snape, not for a second, not even when Voldemort did. She watched him like a hawk, silent, coiled, ready to strike. She never trusted quiet men. And Snape was too quiet, too smooth. He moved through shadows, smiled with no warmth. Bellatrix hated that, hated the way he fooled everyone, but not her. "In the Half-Blood Prince," she snapped, cornered him. Her voice turned to venom. "Where were you when the Dark Lord fell?" she spat. Her tone wasn't curious. It was war. She didn't ask questions. She made accusations. Snape kept his cool. Bellatrix burned. "Why didn't you try to find him?" she pressed. "Why did Dumbledore trust you so easily?" Every word was a dagger. She didn't want explanations. She wanted confessions. Even when he took the unbreakable vow, she didn't blink, didn't soften. She stood behind him, rigid. A storm barely held back. Narcissa believed him. Bellatrix didn't. Not then. Not ever. To her, Snape wasn't loyal. He was useful. And that was worse. He lacked devotion. He lacked fire. Bellatrix couldn't understand cold loyalty. Loyalty without obsession was betrayal waiting to happen. She loved with madness, served with blood. Snape didn't. He followed Voldemort like a shadow, silent, calculating, detached. Bellatrix followed him like a soldier on fire. There was a difference, a dangerous one. She never dueled him, never cursed him. But she didn't need to. Her eyes said everything: distrust, disgust, fury. Bellatrix didn't scream when she was around him. She watched. That was scarier. Snape fooled them all. Voldemort, the Death Eaters, Dumbledore. But not her. Bellatrix saw the lie. She felt it, and she never looked away. In the end, she was wrong about many things, but not about him. Never about him. Number 12, Lestrange was not her birth surname. Before she was Lestrange, she was Black. Bellatrix Black, born into fire, raised in shadows, the eldest daughter of Cygnus and Druella, sister to Narcissa, sister to Andromeda. And in her eyes, the only one who didn't betray the name. The Black family was royalty. Not in title, but in blood. Pure. Powerful. Untouched by filth, as they called it. Bellatrix believed every word. She didn't question the rules. She was the rules. She wore her name like a crown and a weapon. When Andromeda married a Muggle-born, Bellatrix cut her off, not just with words, with fire. "She's dead to me," she once hissed, and she meant it. The Black family burned Andromeda off the family tree. Bellatrix never looked back. Even after marrying Rodolphus Lestrange, the name Black stayed. She signed as Lestrange. But she thought as Black. She fought as Black. Every curse she cast, every oath she swore, it all came from the bloodline, not from her husband. She never loved Rodolphus. She didn't even need him. He was a title, a step deeper into the world of old blood and cold ambition, but her heart belonged to the name she was born with, and to the Dark Lord who mirrored its ideals. When she killed Sirius Black, it wasn't just a duel. It was justice. In her mind, he betrayed the family, spat on their name. She didn't cry, she laughed. "I killed Sirius Black," she sang, wild with joy. It wasn't about victory, it was about cleansing a wound. Even Sirius knew. "You're not just a murderer, you're a Black," he growled before she killed him. He wasn't wrong. The madness, the pride, the fury, they were passed down like heirlooms. She didn't learn them, she inherited them. Her voice, her posture, her cold, aristocratic smile, all Black, not Lestrange. Voldemort didn't create that, he only lit the fire. Number 13, she was not afraid of death. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't fear death. She chased it, laughed at it, invited it in like an old friend. Some say she clung to Voldemort like a coward, but they never watched her fight. On the battlefield, Bellatrix was chaos in human form. She didn't run, she didn't hide. In the Battle of Hogwarts, she dove straight into the fire. 3 opponents at once, Hermione Granger, Ginny Weasley, and Kingsley Shacklebolt. All strong, all ready. Bellatrix grinned. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. She attacked. Spells exploded, walls crumbled, screams echoed. But Bellatrix danced through it, elegant, unhinged. Her eyes blazed with fury and something worse, joy. She didn't care if she got hit. She didn't care if she bled. She wanted the fight. She lived for it. She didn't fight for herself. She fought for him, for Voldemort, her reason, her God, her death wish. If she died for him, so be it. That was her prize, that was her victory, and it made her fearless. When she faced Molly Weasley, Bellatrix laughed, called her children weak. "What will happen to your children when I've killed you?" she sneered. That wasn't strategy, that was cruelty, confidence, madness. She didn't think she could lose. Molly's spells came fast. Bellatrix didn't block them. She twirled, taunted, laughed again. No shield, no fear, just rage and fire. Her last moment was not a scream, it was a smirk. Then silence. She died standing. No begging, no crying, no please. The spell hit her chest. Her eyes widened. Surprise. Nothing else. She was gone before her body hit the floor. She never asked Voldemort to protect her, never expected him to. She didn't need safety, she needed purpose. And he gave it to her. She died for him with pride. Number 14. She was not a loyal wife. Bellatrix Lestrange wore a wedding ring. But she never wore love. Her husband, Rodolphus Lestrange, was a shadow at her side. Always there. Always silent, but never seen by her. Never felt. Their marriage wasn't about hearts. It was bloodlines, power. The House of Black joined the House of Lestrange. That was all. Bellatrix didn't want a partner. She wanted a throne beside Voldemort. And Rodolphus? He stood back and watched. She never pretended to love him, never lied about it. Her heart belonged to someone else, completely, madly. Voldemort wasn't just her master. He was her obsession. "The Dark Lord is pleased with Bellatrix," Snape once said, and that was all she ever needed, his approval, his attention. She never cried out for Rodolphus, not in pain, not in fear. In the Department of Mysteries, she screamed his name, Voldemort's name, with desperation. "You dare speak his name with your unworthy lips," she hissed at Dumbledore. That wasn't loyalty, that was worship. Rodolphus was nothing to her. A soldier with her last name, he followed orders, fought by her side, but she never looked for him, never missed him. Even in Azkaban, she didn't weep for their separation. She waited for Voldemort's return, not her husband's. After Azkaban, it was the same. Rodolphus was loyal, present, but invisible. Bellatrix knelt before Voldemort like he was divine. Her voice softened when she spoke to him. Her panic at the break-in at Gringotts wasn't fear of failure, it was fear of disappointing him. Rodolphus never protested, never fought for her love. Maybe he knew it was never his. Maybe he gave up before trying. Bellatrix didn't hide anything. She was proud. She wanted the world to know she belonged to the Dark Lord. Number 15. Her wand was never unique. Bellatrix Lestrange gripped her wand like a dagger. Every flick was precise, every curse personal. To watch her cast was to watch cruelty performed with elegance. No wonder people thought her wand was cursed, twisted, dark, alive. But that was a myth. Her wand was walnut, core of dragon heartstring, common materials, nothing rare, nothing enchanted, just wood and magic like any other. It looked strange in the films, curved, sharp, like it grew from darkness. But J.K. Rowling never described it that way. The design was Hollywood, the truth, her wand was ordinary. And yet it killed, it tortured, it shattered lives. Why? Because Bellatrix made it so. She used it to carve pain into people's minds. At Malfoy Manor, she pressed it against Hermione's skin. "Crucio!" she hissed. Hermione screamed. Ron begged. Harry fought. The wand didn't glow red. Bellatrix did. Ollivander said walnut wands choose those with powerful minds. Determined, clever. That was Bellatrix. Dragon heartstring, he said, learns quickly, but it's loyal to power. And Bellatrix? She gave it plenty. Her wand never had a name, never had a prophecy. It didn't betray her. It didn't save her. When Molly Weasley struck her down, the wand flew through the air like any other. No curse, no explosion, just silence. It was never the wand, it was always her. People want weapons to be special. They want evil to come with symbols. But Bellatrix didn't need a dark artifact. She was the darkness. The wand was just her shadow. In the end, it's not about what a wand is made of, it's about who wields it. Bellatrix turned something ordinary into something terrifying, not with spells, but with will. Number 16, she didn't always hate muggles. In the shadowed halls of Malfoy Manor, with its heavy velvet drapes and flickering candlelight, Bellatrix Lestrange stood like a monument to madness. Her eyes, sharp as daggers and gleaming with an unnatural light, bore into her prisoner. To the world, she was the perfect image of hatred, a woman who despised Muggle blood with such intensity that her very name sent shivers through the wizarding world. But this is not the whole truth. Beneath the venomous sneer and the wild laughter lived a story rarely told, a story of a girl who wasn't always like this. Bellatrix didn't come into the world snarling at Muggles. That hate, so toxic and consuming, was not a birthright but a slow, poisonous inheritance. The Black family, as old and proud as any pure-blood dynasty, raised their daughters in an atmosphere soaked with elitism. Yet even within those ancient walls there were cracks. Her cousin Sirius, rebellious and bold, would eventually flee that household, denouncing their beliefs. Andromeda, the middle sister, would defy everything and marry a Muggle-born Ted Tonks. These weren't isolated betrayals, they were signs that not every child of that lineage was destined to become a fanatic. Bellatrix, too, once stood at a crossroads. Before her name was stained with torture and her soul corrupted by the Dark Lord, she was just a girl, shaped by her world, but not yet consumed by it. At Hogwarts, Bellatrix was sorted into Slytherin, as expected. But even within the house, known for ambition and cunning, the hatred of Muggles wasn't taught in the curriculum. It was whispered in the common room, passed down like secret spells. But it wasn't doctrine, not yet. During her early years, Bellatrix was a powerful and intelligent student. She wasn't known for her cruelty then. Her classmates described her as intense, a bit arrogant, but not cruel. She excelled in defense against the dark arts, not out of a lust for violence, but out of fascination with power. Power over darkness, power over fear. But something changed when she left school. She didn't dive headfirst into Voldemort's ranks right away. In fact, during the early rise of the Dark Lord, Bellatrix remained in the background, watching, learning, waiting. It wasn't until the ideology began to swell within her, fed by voices that echoed the worst parts of her upbringing, that she began to transform. Her hatred didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It was a drizzle at first, a question, a sneer, a joke at the expense of a Muggle-born. Slowly it hardened into certainty. Narcissa, her younger sister, never crossed that line. Narcissa, though she shared many of the family's beliefs, never became a Death Eater. She never delighted in cruelty. This contrast is critical. because if hatred were destiny, if pure blood ideology were fate, then Narcissa too would have become a monster. But she didn't. Bellatrix made a choice, or rather, she was guided into a choice by years of manipulation, isolation, and the seductive whispers of a dark cause. A key moment came in the early days of Voldemort's first rise. Bellatrix was present at several of the Dark Lord's secret gatherings. Lucius Malfoy recalled seeing her there, sitting quietly, not yet bearing the mark. He described her as curious, intense, always watching him. Voldemort saw in her not just loyalty, but vulnerability, a desire to matter, to serve something greater than herself. He offered her not just a cause, but purpose. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore warned, "It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more." Bellatrix feared irrelevance. Voldemort offered her immortality, if not in life, then in legend. By the time she married Rodolphus Lestrange, Bellatrix had already begun to change. It was not a marriage of love. It was arrangement, duty, and alignment. Rodolphus, a fellow Death Eater, did not truly matter to her. Her real devotion was to the Dark Lord, her obsession, her god. Voldemort didn't just radicalize her, he consumed her. She would become a living vessel for his beliefs, but what makes it tragic is that she let him. She craved the certainty he offered, the clarity of hatred. And hatred is simple. It requires no thought, no complexity. Love is harder. It demands nuance, and Bellatrix was never comfortable with nuance. When Andromeda married a Muggle-born, Bellatrix's fury was volcanic, but beneath the rage was betrayal. Her sister had left her, had chosen love over blood. Bellatrix, who had given everything to her cause, saw in Andromeda a mirror of everything she had forfeited. Her hatred of Muggle-borns was never just about blood. It was about what she had sacrificed. She needed to believe they were beneath her. Otherwise, her entire life was built on lies. In the Order of the Phoenix, during the duel at the Department of Mysteries, Bellatrix kills Sirius Black. But before she does, there's a moment, a flicker of something old. She taunts him with childish fury. Come out, little Sirius." It's a game, but it's also a cry from the past. Sirius had once been her companion, her cousin, her near equal. Now he was the enemy. His laughter, just before he fell through the veil, was the last sound she heard from him, and it enraged her, not because he defied her, but because he reminded her of who she used to be. The tragedy of Bellatrix lies not in her cruelty, but in her waste. She was gifted, brilliant, fearless. Had she chosen differently, she might have been a powerful force for good. Even within her own twisted mind, she wasn't entirely void of affection. Her obsession with Voldemort, though perverse, was still a kind of love, twisted, toxic, but undeniably human. It proved she could feel, that she wanted to be loved, needed, special. Voldemort, of course, felt nothing for her. To him, she was a weapon, a useful fanatic, nothing more. But Bellatrix, blinded by ideology and longing, never saw it. Number 17, Bellatrix never sought leadership among the Death Eaters. In the shadowed corners of the wizarding world, ambition was often the pulse that guided dark hearts. But for Bellatrix Lestrange, the heartbeat of her existence was not ambition, it was devotion, a devotion so consuming, so absolute, that it transcended any hunger for power. Bellatrix, feared and hated as she was, never sought to rule. She didn't care for leading the Death Eaters or carving a kingdom out of Voldemort's conquests. Her role, her pride, her very identity was bound entirely to her place as Voldemort's most loyal servant. She was the sword in his hand, not the mind that wielded it. Some fans have speculated that Bellatrix secretly craved command, that she desired to be next in line beneath the Dark Lord, or perhaps even to replace him if ever he fell. But this interpretation ignores every action she took, every word she spoke, and the very soul of her character. Bellatrix Lestrange was no strategist, no general, no politician. She was a fanatic, and her faith in Voldemort was not rooted in calculations of power. It was reverence, bordering on worship. From the first time we meet her in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, her madness is already legendary. Her escape from Azkaban is described as a terrifying triumph, and she returns not to take control of the Death Eaters, but to throw herself again at the feet of her master. "The Dark Lord has returned, and I serve him," she declares proudly, almost breathlessly. There is no hesitation, no trace of self-interest. For Bellatrix, Voldemort was not just a leader, he was a god. In Half-Blood Prince, her behavior further confirms this unwavering loyalty. She is visibly infuriated when Narcissa seeks help from Severus Snape, fearing that Snape's involvement might overshadow or betray the Dark Lord's plans. Her famous line, "You should be honored, Sissy, he trusts me the most," doesn't come from a place of ambition but from the pride of being the most faithful. She wants to be seen not as the most powerful, but as the most devoted. There is a difference. Bellatrix does not organize, she obeys. She does not plan, she enacts. Her actions during the Department of Mysteries battle are not measured or strategic. They are wild and unrestrained. Her murder of Sirius Black was not sanctioned or calculated. It was an act of chaotic fervor. "I killed Sirius Black," she screams, almost in ecstasy. That moment is not about advancing her position, it's about the thrill of violence done in Voldemort's name. She is drunk on the chaos, not stepping into a leadership vacuum. Contrast her with someone like Lucius Malfoy. Lucius is political calculating. He wishes to influence, to manipulate. He speaks in polite tones and plays the long game. Bellatrix, on the other hand, snarls and cackles. She tortures for pleasure, not for information. She has no interest in alliances or influence among the Death Eaters. To her, they are not comrades to be led or managed. They are lesser tools in Voldemort's war. She does not see them as rivals or stepping stones because she does not want the throne. Even during Voldemort's absence, while many Death Eaters scattered or sought to protect their status, Bellatrix remained defiant. She did not betray him, did not attempt to organize the remnants into her own force. She went to Azkaban, proud and unrepentant. "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban, we will wait," she cries during her trial, her voice filled not with fear but certainty. She is a disciple awaiting her Messiah, not a general consolidating power. Bellatrix's power was formidable, but she never used it to carve out a faction within the Death Eaters. Take, for example, her relationship with the Carrows or even with Severus Snape. She treats them with suspicion or contempt, not because she envies their positions, but because she fears they might betray the Dark Lord or are unworthy of his trust. Her distrust of Snape isn't based on a desire to replace him, but a paranoia that he does not love the Dark Lord as deeply as she does. Her behavior in Deathly Hallows drives the point home with fire and steel. When Voldemort gives her the task of guarding the prisoners in Malfoy Manor, she does not use the position to assert dominance over other Death Eaters. She focuses entirely on interrogating Hermione, trying to extract information that might help her master. And when she sees the sword of Gryffindor, panic consumes her, not because her leadership is at stake, but because she fears she has failed Voldemort. If the Dark Lord comes, and we have not captured Harry Potter, "We are all dead!" she shrieks. Her terror is personal. She fears disappointing him, not losing influence. There is something grotesquely religious in her obsession. Her love for Voldemort is so intense it burns away all self-interest. In the Battle of Hogwarts, she charges into the fray not as a general leading troops, but as a zealot seeking martyrdom. She duels Molly Weasley with all the fire of someone who believes in their own righteousness, not someone pursuing glory. Her final moments are not those of a fallen queen, but of a fanatic struck down mid-sermon. If Bellatrix had desired power, she had ample opportunity to take it. With her strength, her pedigree, and her access to Voldemort, she could have easily manipulated lesser Death Eaters. She could have positioned herself above others in the hierarchy, but she never does. Her greatest achievement in her eyes is not leadership, it is proximity. She is proud not because she commands, but because she is closest to the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord has, in the past, entrusted me with his most precious tasks, she boasts. Again, her joy comes not from control, but from being chosen. Number 18, she was not entirely emotionless. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter universe, few inspire as much fear and fascination as Bellatrix Lestrange. Her name alone carries a whisper of madness, her gaze sharp as broken glass, her loyalty to Voldemort deeper than blood. But to say she was entirely heartless is to simplify a character whose emotional world, though twisted, undeniably existed. Bellatrix was not an empty vessel filled only with cruelty. Her emotions, dark and convoluted as they were, pulsed beneath her wild laughter and murderous gaze. She felt intensely, fiercely, and while her emotions were often poisonous, they were nonetheless real. To ignore that is to miss one of the most disturbing truths about her. Bellatrix Lestrange, Death Eater, torturer, and fanatic, was not incapable of feeling. She simply loved the wrong things too much. The clearest example of her emotional complexity can be seen in her worshipful devotion to Lord Voldemort. To most, he was a tyrant or a leader. To Bellatrix, he was a god. Her eyes burned with a passion so intense that it terrified even her fellow Death Eaters. The Dark Lord has, in the past, entrusted me with his most precious, she hissed, in the Malfoy Manor drawing room, cradling Helga Hufflepuff's cup like it was a holy relic. This was not political allegiance. This was spiritual obsession. She was not merely loyal, she was consumed. Her emotions, although contorted and dangerous, were unmistakably present. She felt for Voldemort not only loyalty, but something disturbingly close to love. It's easy to dismiss this love as fanaticism, but the line between the two is razor-thin in Bellatrix's case. Her voice trembled when she spoke of him. Her actions were driven by an almost religious reverence. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, she did not hesitate to taunt Harry about Sirius Black's death, but when Voldemort appeared, she fell to her knees like a sinner before a savior. "Master," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. In those moments, we saw that Bellatrix was not a soulless killer. She was a woman with a heart, albeit one entirely devoted to a monstrous ideal. And when Voldemort was gone, that heart broke. After the fall of her master, Bellatrix's grief mutated into uncontrollable rage. When she was arrested and imprisoned in Azkaban, she never denounced him. She never tried to escape. She endured the Dementors, the cold, the isolation, not for survival, but because she believed he would return. When he finally did, her reaction was not triumphant calculation. It was unfiltered ecstasy. "I knew you would come. I knew it," she cried, collapsing before him, laughing and weeping at once. These were not the emotions of a mere follower. This was devotion forged in madness and misery. Grief, too, haunted her, even if she transformed it into violence. After Voldemort's final defeat at the Battle of Hogwarts, Bellatrix fought with a ferocity that can only be described as desperation. She saw the world crumbling around her, not just the battle, but the entire belief system she had devoted her life to. When Molly Weasley duelled her, Bellatrix did not run or retreat. She laughed. She fought with the manic energy of someone who had nothing left to lose. Her death was not the fall of a mindless monster. It was the final act of a woman who had loved something so deeply it destroyed her. But there is another side to Bellatrix that fans rarely acknowledge, one that slipped through the cracks of her brutality like a flicker of forgotten humanity. In the Black family tapestry, Bellatrix is surrounded by names blotted out, burned off, erased. She was raised in a house that prized blood purity above all else, where children were praised for cruelty and punished for kindness. And yet, within that legacy of emotional barrenness, Bellatrix revealed an unexpected moment of softness toward a creature many purebloods despised, the house elf Kreacher. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Kreacher speaks bitterly of his mistress's relatives, but he never expresses hatred toward Bellatrix. In fact, he speaks of her with a reverence that mirrors her own tone when addressing Voldemort. Mistress Bellatrix always spoke to Kreacher with respect, he mutters. When Sirius tries to silence the elf, Kreacher's resentment flares, but it never turns on Bellatrix. The truth is hidden there, barely mentioned in the text, but gleaming like a shard of glass. Bellatrix treated him well. Whether it was out of calculated manipulation or genuine affection, her behavior toward Kreacher stood in stark contrast to her usual contempt for those she deemed beneath her. There's something deeply unsettling about imagining Bellatrix Lestrange being kind, even in a limited way. But this rare interaction proves that she was not devoid of empathy. She could recognize loyalty in others, perhaps because she valued it above all else. Kreacher, in his own way, was as fanatically devoted as she was, and perhaps that kindred spirit stirred something dormant in her. It's impossible to know if Bellatrix ever considered Kreacher more than a servant, but the fact remains she never hurt him. For someone like Bellatrix, that's significant. Her relationship with her sisters also hinted at something deeper, something more human. Narcissa Malfoy, cold and elegant, relied on Bellatrix in moments of crisis. In Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix accompanies Narcissa to Spinner's End to seek Snape's help in protecting Draco. Bellatrix protests, scolds, and argues, but she goes. Why? Because it's her sister, because even as she rants about loyalty to the Dark Lord, she cannot completely silence the ties of blood. "The Dark Lord trusts me to babysit Draco," she snaps, but she stays through the meeting, watching over Narcissa like a fiercely protective shadow. That's not heartlessness, that's twisted, sisterly love. Number 19. Bellatrix was not close with her sisters. Bellatrix Lestrange, born Bellatrix Black, was not the kind of sister one would confide in during dark nights or laugh with overshared memories. Her name alone summoned images of cruelty, loyalty twisted into obsession, and a soul consumed by darkness. The assumption that she shared warm sisterly bonds with Narcissa and Andromeda Black belongs to those who have not looked closely enough. In truth, Bellatrix's relationships with her sisters were fractured, cold, and ultimately broken by blood ideology. They were daughters of Cygnus and Druella Black, born into the grandeur of the ancient House of Black, a family obsessed with blood purity and tradition. From the very beginning, the expectations were clear. Loyalty to blood, loyalty to the old ways, and loyalty to power. Bellatrix, the eldest, embraced these values with a fervor that bordered on religious. She was proud, intense, and determined to be the best. "The Dark Lord will rise again, Sissy," she once hissed to Narcissa, with eyes alight with fevered devotion. "He will return and cleanse the world of the filth that poisons our blood." Andromeda, by contrast, was the rebel. She was smart and thoughtful, but more importantly, she questioned. She saw the hypocrisy and cruelty in their upbringing. When she fell in love with Ted Tonks, a muggle-born wizard with a kind heart and gentle soul, she knew the price of that love. And yet, she paid it without hesitation. Bellatrix, upon hearing of the union, did not merely disapprove, she erupted with rage. "She is no sister of mine," she declared, according to Narcissa's later recollection, and with those words, Bellatrix erased Andromeda from her heart. In the black family tapestry that adorned the wall of 12 Grimmauld Place, Andromeda's name was burned away, the fabric scorched as though to signify the very flame that had consumed Bellatrix's regard for her. Sirius Black, their cousin, later pointed to the blackened spot on the tapestry and said, "That's what happens to blood traitors in this family." But it was Bellatrix who had championed that erasure. She did not mourn her sister. She despised her. Bellatrix's loyalty was never to family, not in the traditional sense. Her love was reserved for Lord Voldemort, cold, demanding, and absolute. Even her interactions with Narcissa were laced with the shadow of that devotion. When Narcissa came to seek help from Severus Snape in Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix accompanied her, suspicious and scornful. "My sister has a pure heart and she can't see the truth," she said, casting an accusatory glare. She did not accompany Narcissa out of love, but to control the situation. Narcissa, for all her pride and elegance, was never as committed to the cause as Bellatrix. Her priorities were family, specifically her son Draco. She saw the world through the lens of a mother, not a fanatic. Bellatrix saw this as weakness. During the Battle of Hogwarts, as Narcissa searched desperately for her son, Bellatrix remained by Voldemort's side, guarding him like a faithful servant, ready to kill for him. And she did. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione were captured and taken to Malfoy Manor, it was Bellatrix who tortured Hermione. Narcissa stood aside, clearly distressed, but did not intervene. Perhaps it was fear, perhaps it was shock, but it was Bellatrix who laughed as she inflicted pain. "You filthy little mudblood," she spat, cutting Hermione's skin with her knife. There was no sisterly softness in her heart, only fanaticism and rage. The irony is painful. Bellatrix, so obsessed with blood purity, had more in common with the Dark Lord than with her own kin. Where Voldemort had no family and no capacity for love, Bellatrix shed her family ties one by one until only her loyalty to him remained. And even that was unreciprocated. Tonks, the daughter of Andromeda and Ted, was Bellatrix's niece by blood, but that blood meant nothing to her. When Bellatrix confronted her during the Battle of Hogwarts, there was no mercy in her eyes. "I killed Sirius Black!" she taunted, her voice wild with triumph. She would have killed Tonks too, and she eventually did, fighting without hesitation or remorse. The woman who once may have held her baby niece in her arms had become a creature of hatred. Her contempt for Andromeda's family did not end with Tonks. She never spoke of Ted Tonks, but the silence was louder than words. He was dirt under her shoes, a disgrace to the family line. Andromeda, who had chosen love over legacy, became a ghost to her eldest sister. Bellatrix refused even to acknowledge her existence. Even among Death Eaters, Bellatrix was different. She was the only woman in Voldemort's inner circle, and one of the most feared. But behind that cold strength lay a broken family. Lucius Malfoy, her brother-in-law, feared her madness. Narcissa respected her power, but never trusted her judgment. Andromeda feared nothing, but she mourned. She once told a friend, "Bellatrix died the moment she chose him over us." In the Deathly Hallows, Narcissa made the ultimate betrayal of Voldemort's cause. She lied to him. When she found Harry alive in the Forbidden Forest, She leaned over him and whispered, "Is Draco alive?" When Harry nodded, she stood and declared him dead. She saved Harry's life not out of moral obligation, but because of maternal love. Bellatrix would never have understood that. Their final confrontation came in the chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts. As Molly Weasley stepped forward to protect her daughter, Bellatrix attacked with her usual fury. She fought to kill, but she underestimated a mother's rage. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly screamed before striking Bellatrix down. It was not a duel, it was justice. Bellatrix died as she lived, in pursuit of a twisted ideal, blind to the love and loyalty that might have saved her. Her sisters lived on. Andromeda, despite all loss, found strength in her grandson. Narcissa withdrew into the shadows, her family broken but intact. Only Bellatrix was consumed by the fire she carried inside. Her life was not a tragedy in the classical sense. She made her choices freely. She turned away from her sisters not because she had to, but because she believed they were weak. She chose Voldemort. She chose violence. She chose hate. And in doing so, she lost the chance for redemption. The Black sisters were not close. They could have been. They were raised in the same house, by the same parents, told the same stories, but they responded differently. One chose rebellion. One chose survival. One chose destruction. And that made all the difference. Bellatrix's fanaticism left no room for sisterhood, no tenderness, no forgiveness. She severed ties with Andromeda with the same ruthlessness she used on enemies in battle. Her bond with Narcissa, such as it was brittle and conditional. It cracked the moment loyalty to Voldemort came into question. In the end, Bellatrix stood alone. Not physically, she was surrounded by fellow Death Eaters, but emotionally, she was isolated. A woman who had been sister, daughter, cousin, aunt, and yet had no one left to mourn her, no one to say her name with love. Perhaps the saddest part of Bellatrix's story is not her fall, but the absence of anyone who truly tried to save her. Narcissa feared her. Andromeda avoided her. Her parents encouraged her darkness. Voldemort used her. No one pulled her back from the edge, and maybe no one could. But that does not excuse her cruelty. She hurt people deliberately, mercilessly. She hurt her family. She betrayed what it meant to be a sister, and in doing so she sealed her fate. Not as a martyr, not even as a villain worthy of respect, but as a cautionary tale. A sister lost to madness. Number 20. Bellatrix was not exclusively cruel to enemies. Bellatrix Lestrange was never merely a warrior of the Dark Lord. She was a manifestation of cruelty itself, not bound by logic, strategy, or even necessity. Many believed her violence was calculated, reserved for those who threatened Lord Voldemort or stood against the Death Eaters. But that belief crumbles under the weight of her actions, most brutally illustrated not on a battlefield, but in a cold, high-ceiling drawing room at Malfoy Manor, where the screams of a young girl echoed off marble floors. Bellatrix's sadism, in truth, knew no boundaries. The scene was seared into the memory of anyone who read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had just been captured by Snatchers and delivered to Malfoy Manor, a place once noble, now twisted into a lair of torment. Hermione Granger, barely 17, clever, loyal, and fiercely brave, was thrown before Bellatrix like prey before a lioness. Bellatrix didn't see a girl, she saw a victim. She hissed like a serpent when she saw the sword of Gryffindor clutched in their belongings. That sword, thought lost, thought secured in the vaults of Gringotts, was now in the possession of blood traitors and a mudblood. That word, mudblood, laced with venom, was Bellatrix's favourite insult. "You filthy little mudblood," she sneered, raising her wand. The others watched helplessly as she dragged Hermione away, up the steps, into the drawing room. The screams followed soon after. Bellatrix tortured not for duty, but for pleasure. Her cruelty was never merely about gaining information. Although she used that as a justification, it was always more sinister. "I'll ask again," she purred in the book, pressing her wand against Hermione's throat. "Where did you get that sword?" But her real satisfaction came not from the answer, but from the scream that followed. She carved the word mudblood into Hermione's skin, letter by letter, an act so vile it bled with symbolism. Not just pain, but humiliation, branding the girl as lesser in her eyes. There was no tactical gain in mutilating Hermione. Bellatrix knew it. She wasn't a fool, she was a sadist. The pleasure she derived from inflicting pain was not accidental, nor a side effect of her allegiance. It was her addiction. While Voldemort sought power, immortality, and control, Bellatrix sought something far more disturbing: agony, raw, human agony, the kind that twists the soul and leaves scars no spell can erase. Hermione was not her only victim, merely the most well-known. Even among her fellow Death Eaters, Bellatrix's ferocity made others uneasy. Lucius Malfoy, whose manor had become a prison, flinched at her outbursts. Narcissa, her own sister, looked away as Bellatrix's laughter echoed through the halls, while others screamed. Bellatrix was not loyal, she was obsessed. And obsession, unchained from reason, becomes monstrosity. Consider the death of Sirius Black, her own cousin. Bellatrix did not hesitate to kill him in the Department of Mysteries. Her wand flicked, her curse struck, and Sirius disappeared through the veil. There was no moment of conflict, no hesitation in her eyes. And after it was done, she laughed. "I killed Sirius Black," she sang. Her joy was so perverse it made even Voldemort scowl. This was not about eliminating an enemy. This was euphoria. This was her climax. And still, there are those who argue she only acted against enemies of the cause. But were the Longbottoms enemies? Frank and Alice Longbottom were tortured into madness by Bellatrix's wand. And for what? They had been Aurors, yes, fighters, but they were captured, defeated. They posed no threat. And yet Bellatrix used the Cruciatus curse with such fervour that she shattered their minds beyond repair. Neville's mother would later hand him empty candy wrappers in St. Mungo's. Lost in a world Bellatrix had burned into her with cruelty. She didn't need to do it. She wanted to. That is the distinction. Voldemort might have ordered punishment, but it was Bellatrix who prolonged it, who made it personal. "What did you do to them?" Harry once asked Neville. And Neville, quietly, replied, "She did it, Bellatrix Lestrange." No further explanation needed. In Malfoy Manor, it wasn't a battle. It was a theatre of torment. While Hermione screamed, Ron Weasley pounded on the floor below, screaming her name, his fists bloody. Harry was stunned, helpless, listening. Dobby would arrive soon, but for long minutes all they heard were her cries, and Bellatrix's cold, delighted voice asking the same question again and again. Later, when Hermione lay pale, bleeding and trembling, she whispered what had happened. She was laughing. There was no necessity in that, no logic. It wasn't to break resistance. It wasn't to extract secrets. Bellatrix enjoyed watching someone unravel. Even Draco, arrogant and conditioned for cruelty, looked away during that scene. The boy who'd once called Hermione a mudblood in school was now frozen with horror. Because what Bellatrix did wasn't ideology, it wasn't politics, it was evil, pure and simple, an evil that makes allies uncomfortable and enemies scream for mercy. It's tempting to see her as Voldemort's shadow, but she wasn't. Bellatrix was a separate force, chaotic and self-indulgent. Voldemort was methodical, Bellatrix was wild. His cruelty served a purpose. Hers existed for its own sake. "You're going to die," she once told Tonks during the Battle of Hogwarts, "just like your filthy, muggle-born mother." The contempt wasn't strategic, it was personal. And Bellatrix never respected boundaries. Children, cousins, prisoners, they were all fair game. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she targeted Ginny Weasley. Her curse missed by inches. Molly Weasley stepped in, her rage uncontainable. "Not my daughter!" she screamed, before striking Bellatrix down. The crowd didn't cheer because she was a Death Eater. They cheered because a monster had fallen. And yet some still romanticize her and the dark beauty, the loyal servant. They forget the blood under her nails. They forget that she laughed when Hermione cried, that she carved her hatred into a child. They forget the Longbottoms. They forget Sirius. There's a line in Deathly Hallows when Bellatrix screams, "You dare speak his name with your unworthy lips, you filthy half-blood," aimed at Harry. But it could have been anyone. She saw filth in everyone who wasn't her. Her world was not built on logic. It was built on hate. She was not a soldier. She was not a tool. She was not merely a follower. She was a sadist dressed in elegance. The scars she left were not only physical. Hermione never spoke much of it afterward, but her silence was telling. Ron's trembling hands, Harry's stone-cold glare, they all understood what had happened. Not just that Hermione had been tortured, but who had done it and why. Because Bellatrix didn't care whether you were strong or weak, guilty or innocent. She wanted to hear you scream. She didn't believe in mercy. She didn't need a reason. She didn't pause, hesitate, or reflect. Her cruelty was not a means. It was an end. And that is why she was feared, not just by the Order of the Phoenix, but by her own kind, because even evil has rules. Bellatrix broke them. Number 21. Bellatrix did not respect Lucius Malfoy. It was never truly a secret, nor was it ever formally declared. Yet from the moment Bellatrix Lestrange re-entered the Dark Lord's inner circle, after her escape from Azkaban, the atmosphere between her and Lucius Malfoy thickened with something darker than rivalry, open disdain. She was a flame, wild and unpredictable, burning with religious fervour for Voldemort. Lucius, in contrast, was cold marble, elegant, composed, but ultimately fragile. Bellatrix saw that weakness, and she despised him for it. Bellatrix's contempt was never subtle. Her words were blades, and she wielded them with glee. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when the Death Eaters gather at Malfoy Manor, Bellatrix's sharp tongue carves at Lucius's pride. "You should be proud," she sneers, turning to Narcissa, Lucius's wife. "Your son is marked by the Dark Lord for a mission." Her words drip with venom. The irony is clear. Lucius failed Voldemort, and now his son is paying the price. Bellatrix doesn't just state it, she enjoys it. She wants Lucius to feel the humiliation of knowing his child must do what he could not. The Ministry debacle was a turning point. In Order of the Phoenix, Lucius leads the Death Eaters into the Department of Mysteries, arrogant and sure of himself. But he fails. The prophecy is lost. His followers are captured. Voldemort must reveal himself to save them, an act that enrages him. Lucius pays dearly. He is imprisoned in Azkaban, and even when released, he is no longer a favoured servant. To Voldemort, failure is treason. To Bellatrix, failure is disgrace. She begins to treat Lucius not as a fellow aristocrat or comrade, but as a weak dog clinging to the master's shadow. There's a moment, quiet but powerful, in Deathly Hallows when Voldemort has taken over Malfoy Manor and uses it as his base. Lucius is no longer the proud head of a pure-blood family. He stands by the wall, his blonde hair lank, his face pale and hollowed by fear. He tries to offer his wand to Voldemort, a desperate attempt to regain favor. Voldemort takes it without gratitude, like one might accept a rag from a servant. Bellatrix watches it all, her eyes alive with amusement and cruelty. Her smirk lingers as she watches Lucius's last thread of dignity unravel. To understand Bellatrix's contempt, one must understand her worldview. She believed in the absolute power of blood, yes, but even more than that, she believed in loyalty. Not the quiet, political loyalty of the Malfoys. Bellatrix believed in sacrifice. She had gone to Azkaban without flinching, proudly declaring in Goblet of Fire, "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban. We will wait." She had bled for Voldemort. Lucius had not. He had played both sides. She saw through his masks. In Half-Blood Prince, during the confrontation in Spinner's End, Bellatrix says, "You should be proud, Narcissa. If I had sons, I would be glad to give them to the Dark Lord." It's a dagger not just to Lucius, but to the entire Malfoy family. She mocks Narcissa's fear, uses Lucius's disgrace as leverage, and positions herself as the ideal servant. There's no mistaking the message, "I am everything he is not." Even her body language betrays her loathing. In the films, Helena Bonham Carter gives Bellatrix an unhinged, unpredictable presence. When she is in the same room as Lucius, she leans forward with a hungry grin, tilting her head like a predator, assessing a wounded animal. In Deathly Hallows Part 1, as Voldemort gathers his inner circle at the Malfoy estate, Lucius fidgets nervously. Bellatrix, in contrast, is radiant. When Voldemort humiliates Lucius, taking his wand and speaking of disappointments, Bellatrix giggles, not sympathetically. No, she revels in it. There's a twisted poetry in the way Bellatrix treats Lucius. They are, after all, related, cousins by marriage, but blood ties mean little to Bellatrix unless they serve the Dark Lord. Even her sister Narcissa is treated with a condescending affection, the way a zealot might pity a non-believer. For Lucius, she shows no pity, only scorn. One could argue that Bellatrix resents Lucius's privilege. He lived in a manor while she rotted in Azkaban. He played political games while she screamed under the Dementors. He wore tailored robes while she scratched her name into stone walls. In her eyes, Lucius never suffered for Voldemort. And for Bellatrix, suffering was proof of faith. Her madness was a badge of honor, his fear was a stain of shame. In Deathly Hallows, as Voldemort uses the Malfoy home as a prison, Lucius becomes a ghost in his own house. He walks behind his wife and son, no longer the master. Bellatrix, on the other hand, becomes the loudest voice at the table. She speaks directly to Voldemort, offers opinions, mocks the prisoners, and even dares to question plans. She has eclipsed Lucius entirely. The power dynamic has shifted. Lucius has fallen. Bellatrix has risen. One of the most damning moments comes when the Golden Trio is captured and brought to Malfoy Manor. Hermione is tortured by Bellatrix, a scene that shows the unfiltered cruelty of her soul. But behind the violence, there's another detail. Lucius's complete impotence. He stands nearby, uncertain, trying to recognize Harry and claim some kind of reward. Bellatrix mocks him with her eyes alone. "You failed again." Even in this moment of apparent triumph, Lucius is irrelevant. She knows it. He knows it. Voldemort knows it. Bellatrix is obsessed with hierarchy, not just the one Voldemort enforces, but the one she believes exists naturally. In that unspoken system, she is a queen of suffering and devotion. Lucius is a courtier who betrayed the crown. She sees herself as a priestess of the Dark Lord's vision. He is a politician, a whisperer, a man who valued survival more than submission. That makes him, in her eyes, a traitor. Her comments are never just insults, they're sermons. When she mocks Lucius, it's not petty, it's ideological. She believes that he deserves disgrace because he represents everything she finds unworthy: caution, pride, cowardice, calculation. Bellatrix is pure emotion, love and hate tangled in blood. Lucius is pure structure, a legacy crumbling under the weight of real danger. Even Narcissa notices the chasm growing. She tries to maintain the old decorum, the traditions of pure blood families, but she cannot ignore that her sister now treats her husband like a relic. When Narcissa begs Snape for help protecting Draco, she goes alone. Lucius is nowhere in sight. He has no more power. Bellatrix watches the proceedings with half-lidded contempt. She does not interrupt. She doesn't need to. Her silence is louder than words. Bellatrix's behavior in these moments isn't just a matter of personality, it reflects the shifting world around them. As the war escalates, ideology trumps blood. Zealots like Bellatrix are rewarded. Strategists like Lucius are discarded. Voldemort knows who will die for him and who will run. Bellatrix knows it too. That knowledge fuels her cruelty. Every time she looks at Lucius, she sees proof that she was right to suffer, that he was wrong to scheme. In her final moments at the Battle of Hogwarts, Bellatrix dies laughing, dueling Molly Weasley. She dies as she lived, furious, devoted, dangerous. Lucius, meanwhile, is already broken. He does not fight in the final battle. He runs through the chaos, seeking his son. He is no longer a Death Eater, no longer a servant, just a father, desperate and lost. Bellatrix would have spat at him for it. The ultimate tragedy of Lucius Malfoy is that he tried to play a game where the rules changed. He believed blood and wealth would protect him. Bellatrix believed only in pain and power. She won Voldemort's favor through madness. He lost it through caution. And Bellatrix never let him forget it. Throughout the saga, Bellatrix serves as a brutal mirror reflecting what true fanaticism looks like. Lucius, with his elegant words and polished sneers, is no match for someone who would slit her own throat if Voldemort willed it. In that contrast, Rowling shows the spectrum of evil, one cold and cowardly, the other hot and consuming, but it is Bellatrix who holds the power, and she knows it. Her scorn for Lucius is not a side note. It is a running commentary on the failure of aristocratic pride in the face of radical devotion. Every glance, every giggle, every insult carries a deeper message. You failed, Lucius. I did not. She doesn't need to say it aloud, but often she does, because nothing gives her more pleasure than watching the mighty fall. And perhaps that is Bellatrix's greatest delight, not just serving Voldemort, but witnessing the destruction of those who only pretended to serve. Lucius Malfoy stood at the front once, but by the end he was beneath her boots, and she made sure he knew it. Number 22. She was not selfish. In the shadow-drenched halls of Malfoy Manor, amidst the cold grandeur of pure-blood aristocracy, a woman stood apart. Not because she lacked lineage, she was, after all, a Black by birth and a Lestrange by marriage, but because she had long since severed ties with the comforts that such heritage afforded. Bellatrix Lestrange did not hunger for gold or the weight of political influence. She did not crave applause nor the luxurious trappings that most Death Eaters quietly accepted as a byproduct of their allegiance. What Bellatrix sought, what consumed her like a flame-devouring parchment, was the favor of Lord Voldemort. It is easy to misunderstand her, to view her as yet another sycophant orbiting the Dark Lord, hoping to glean status or security. Lucius Malfoy, for example, had joined Voldemort's cause with every intention of preserving his family's power. He wore his mask like a velvet cloak, fashionable and practical. But Bellatrix wore hers like a second skin. She didn't whisper Voldemort's name in secret. She screamed it. She didn't fear the consequences of being caught. She welcomed them, basking in the agony of her loyalty. Her madness was not a mask, but a weapon sharpened by devotion. When asked at her trial in the Department of Mysteries whether she regretted torturing Alice and Frank Longbottom into insanity, her response wasn't one of defiance, it was pride. The Dark Lord will rise again, and when he does, he will reward us beyond all imagining, she shrieked. Not a word about money, not a mention of position. Her reward was his return. That, for her, was enough. Born Bellatrix Black, she was raised to believe in the supremacy of pure-blood wizards. Her sisters, Andromeda and Narcissa, chose different paths, one marrying a Muggle-born, and the other tethering herself to a cautious, calculating man. But Bellatrix chose fire. She chose pain and loyalty and war. Her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange was not one of love or even political strategy. It was a formality, a name to wear like armor while she marched into battle for the only man she truly revered. We see glimpses of her absolute disinterest in wealth throughout the series. Unlike other Death Eaters, Bellatrix did not attempt to infiltrate the Ministry to gain influence for personal reasons. She did not lobby for new laws nor manipulate the bureaucracies of Wizarding Britain for her own ends. Her only motivation was to install Voldemort at the head of the world and burn everything that stood in his way. If he had demanded that she throw herself into a fire, she would not have hesitated. In her, he found not a follower, but a disciple. Even among the Dark Lord's inner circle, Bellatrix was a rare breed. Severus Snape played a game of shadows, seeking to protect Lily's memory and his own guilt. Peter Pettigrew, the traitor, betrayed his friends out of cowardice and a hunger for safety. But Bellatrix? She never wavered, never doubted. She was there during his first fall, imprisoned for her crimes without begging for mercy. While others renounced Voldemort to avoid Azkaban, Bellatrix refused to speak a word against him. She looked the Wizengamot in the eye and told them she would do it again, and she meant it. Consider her behavior upon Voldemort's return. She didn't wait for the tide to shift in his favor before rejoining him. As soon as she was freed from Azkaban, a prison that had drained the life from many, she was back at his side, frenzied and devoted, as if no time had passed. Azkaban had made her thinner, paler, but not broken. If anything, her absence had distilled her fanaticism into something purer, something more dangerous. She had every opportunity to choose a different life. Her family was among the oldest and most powerful. She could have lived in comfort, hosted tea with other pure-blood matrons, kept her wand for decorative purposes only. But no, Bellatrix rejected domestic life with the same vehemence that others reject poverty. She lived on the battlefield, she lived in darkness, she lived for him. Her behavior at Malfoy Manor underscores this truth. When Voldemort handed her the sword of Gryffindor and ordered her to keep it safe, she trembled with joy. "My lord," she whispered, "I will guard it well." Not for personal gain, not for the promise of treasure, but because he trusted her. That was her reward. She considered it a sin that others didn't see the world as she did. When Narcissa asked her to assist in Draco's mission to kill Dumbledore, Bellatrix warned her sister not to doubt the Dark Lord's plans. "You should be proud. If I had sons, I would be glad to give them to the service of the Dark Lord," she cried. Her loyalty wasn't conditional, it was absolute, unshakable, even in the face of death. Perhaps the most striking demonstration of her selflessness came during the Battle of Hogwarts. She did not flee when the tide turned against Voldemort. She did not look for escape, nor bargain for her life. Instead, she fought Hermione Granger, Ginny Weasley, and Luna Lovegood alone, relishing the fight, still seeking to destroy those who opposed her master. When Molly Weasley challenged her, Bellatrix laughed. She believed herself invincible, fueled by her purpose, blazing with the fury of a zealot. Her final moments were not those of a woman afraid to die, but of one denied the chance to kill for her lord. That was what made her scream, what made her rage. She had not completed her purpose. Her death was not the fall of a villain hoarding power, but the end of a martyr to a twisted cause. Voldemort's face twisted with fury when she fell, not because he loved her, but because he knew she had been the most loyal, the last true believer. In the end, Bellatrix Lestrange remains one of the few Death Eaters whose loyalty cannot be traced to any selfish impulse. She was not trying to buy safety, nor secure privilege. She had those already and abandoned them freely. Her belief in Voldemort was theological. He was her God, her Messiah, her purpose. And like many who surrender their lives to an ideal, she became both terrifying and tragic. Even her hatred of others, Muggleborns, blood traitors, and anyone outside the narrow box of her beliefs, was not driven by jealousy or ambition. It was dogma. It was doctrine. She didn't hate Hermione Granger because Hermione was clever or defiant. She hated her because she existed, because her blood wasn't right, because her master told her so. There was no nuance in Bellatrix's world, no grey, only black and green. When Dobby the house elf defied her and rescued Harry and his friends from the Malfoy cellar, she responded not like a noblewoman disgraced, but like a fanatic blasphemed. "You filthy little monkey!" she screamed, and threw her knife with the fury of someone whose entire belief system had just been violated by a creature she deemed subhuman. Her rage was not about failure. It was about desecration. Even the way she looked, gaunt, wild-haired, eyes blazing, betrayed a woman who had long abandoned vanity. She didn't care how the world saw her. She didn't care if people feared her or mocked her. Her soul had been burned and reshaped into a singular, relentless force. All she desired was Voldemort's favor. All she dreamed of was his victory. And yet, for all her horror, there is something undeniably compelling about her. Not in sympathy, but in awe. How can one human being surrender so much? How can one soul burn so brightly and so terribly for another? It is why she remains such an unforgettable character. She wasn't corrupted by ambition or greed. She wasn't bought. She gave herself freely, completely, irrevocably. Number 23. Bellatrix never wanted to replace Voldemort. In the shadowy heart of the wizarding world, where darkness often gave birth to ambition, one witch stood apart, not for her lust for power, but for her unyielding devotion. Bellatrix Lestrange, born Bellatrix Black, could have rivaled any dark wizard in cruelty, in skill, and in sheer magical ferocity. Yet among all the Death Eaters who surrounded Lord Voldemort, she was singular in one crucial way. She never sought to take his place. The idea that Bellatrix secretly wished to supplant the Dark Lord is not only baseless, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of who she was. To Bellatrix, Lord Voldemort was not merely a leader to follow, he was a god to worship. Her devotion bordered on religious fanaticism. Throughout the Harry Potter series, her actions reflect not ambition, but obsession, an obsession that burned through her like dark fire. She was never a schemer in the shadows, never a quiet manipulator hoping to rise through betrayal. She was front and center, always the first to fight, the last to retreat, and the most willing to die for him. The Dark Lord has, in the past, entrusted me with his most precious, if I dare use the word, secrets, she told Severus Snape in Half-Blood Prince, her voice full of pride, not ambition. There was no calculation in her tone, only reverence. Take, for example, the battle at the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix. It was Bellatrix who led the charge. When Lucius Malfoy faltered and panicked, she remained unyielding. She taunted Harry, murdered Sirius Black, her own cousin, with sadistic glee, and fought to retrieve the prophecy for her master. "I killed Sirius Black," she sang, not for her own glory, but as a gift to her beloved lord. Her triumph was not personal, it was devotional. This wasn't the behavior of someone planning a quiet coup. This was a zealot, a fanatic. Her voice trembled not when she faced danger, but when she uttered Voldemort's name. She feared only one thing, his displeasure. In The Half-Blood Prince, she accompanies Narcissa to Snape's house and openly challenges him, not because she wants his position, but because she fears that he is not loyal enough to Voldemort. Her distrust of Snape isn't rooted in politics. It's rooted in jealousy, jealousy that Snape might have the Dark Lord's favor and she might not. And how can we forget her demeanor at Malfoy Manor in Deathly Hallows? When she discovers that Harry Potter is captured and brought before her, she doesn't see a chance to claim glory or ascend within the ranks of the Death Eaters. She panics. Her fear is immediate and raw. "You dare take a wizard's wand? Stupid little boy, she screeches at Hermione, but that fear only increases when she believes the sword of Gryffindor has fallen into enemy hands. Her mind doesn't race to thoughts of usurping Voldemort's power. It races to the punishment she might suffer if she has failed him. Bellatrix's family name, Black, once held power and pride in the pure blood community, but she threw all that away for her master. Her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange was not built on love or even ambition, but likely an alliance arranged to maintain pure blood ties. Her heart, her soul, every spell she cast belonged to Voldemort. Her obsession was so intense that even other Death Eaters were uncomfortable. When Voldemort awarded her a mission, she didn't see it as a test or a challenge. She saw it as a blessing. The depth of her devotion is best illustrated in Deathly Hallows when she realizes that Voldemort has given his wand to Draco. The horror in her voice is unmistakable. My lord Draco is not a reliable—" She tries to protest, but Voldemort silences her with a glance. Still, her face betrays her agony. This was not a strategic concern. This was spiritual betrayal. She feared that someone unworthy was holding something sacred that belonged to her god. Bellatrix's fanaticism was not subtle. In Half-Blood Prince, when Snape speaks calmly of Voldemort's plans, Bellatrix cannot sit still. Her voice is edged with hysteria, her movements frantic. Her passion consumes her. She isn't cold and calculating like Lucius or manipulative like Barty Crouch Jr. She's fire and storm. Her madness is sincere, her love is real, and let us not ignore the ultimate evidence, her death. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Bellatrix doesn't try to flee. She doesn't retreat. She fights with a ferocity bordering on the divine. When Molly Weasley confronts her after Bellatrix nearly kills Ginny, the two duel in a whirlwind of fury. Bellatrix laughs as she duels, even as she's cornered. She laughs because she is doing what she was born to do, fight and kill for her master. Her death was not a failure. It was, in her mind, martyrdom. Some fan theorists argue that Bellatrix's closeness to Voldemort, especially in the final book, suggests something more. Some ambition, some hidden plan. They point to her pregnancy with Voldemort's child in The Cursed Child as evidence. But even this supports the opposite argument. Bellatrix didn't want power, she wanted him. She wanted his approval, his touch, his essence. Delphine, their child, wasn't conceived as a political pawn, she was the product of obsession. Bellatrix never wanted to be Voldemort, she wanted to belong to him. In truth, Bellatrix's role among the Death Eaters was never that of a rival. She was a disciple, a high priestess in a dark religion. She tortured, killed, and sacrificed everything for Voldemort, including her freedom. After the First Wizarding War, she didn't hide like many of the others. She didn't renounce him. She went to Azkaban proudly, her head held high. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she cried during her trial. "He will reward us beyond any of his other supporters. We alone were faithful." This wasn't the rhetoric of a usurper. This was the creed of a fanatic. And what about her behavior during the resurrection of Voldemort in Goblet of Fire? Though she wasn't physically present at the graveyard, her absence was later addressed. Voldemort himself mentioned her by name, noting that she had stayed faithful. And here we have 6 missing Death Eaters. 3 dead in my service. 1 too cowardly to return, he will pay. 1 who I believe has left me forever. He will be killed, of course. And 1 who remains my most faithful servant, and who has already re-entered my service. That one was Barty Crouch Jr., but Voldemort's reverence for Bellatrix would be made clear when she escaped from Azkaban. She was welcomed back, honored, embraced, not scrutinized. Even in the inner circle, Bellatrix never competed for favor in a way that suggested personal ambition. Her battles with Snape were about loyalty, not power. Her contempt for Narcissa's wavering wasn't rooted in a desire to climb over her sister. It was about purging weakness from Voldemort's ranks. And her murder of Tonks, a family member, was not personal, it was religious. Bellatrix viewed every action through the lens of devotion. The suggestion that Bellatrix wanted to replace Voldemort also misinterprets her understanding of power. She didn't see power as a means of self-glorification. She saw it as something he possessed, something divine, unreachable, sacred. She worshipped that power. She bathed in its presence like a moth to flame. To want to replace it would mean to corrupt it. And Bellatrix, for all her cruelty, had one unwavering principle. The Dark Lord was perfection. Her madness was genuine, yes, but it was not the madness of a woman plotting to rule. It was the madness of a woman who had given her soul to someone she believed to be beyond human. Even her own name, Bellatrix, the female warrior, spoke not of dominance, but of service. She was the sword, not the crown. Bellatrix Lestrange was many things, a murderer, a sadist, a fanatic, but she was not a usurper. Her every breath was a hymn to Voldemort, her every kill a sacrifice, her every moment of joy came from his presence. When he died, she died. When he rose, she rose. Her fate was his, her purpose his will. And to think otherwise is to strip away the very core of who she was. No, Bellatrix never wanted to replace Voldemort. She didn't want his throne. She wanted his shadow, his voice, his pain. She wanted his cause. She wanted to dissolve into him like mist, into darkness. In her twisted, burning heart, he wasn't a man to surpass. He was a god to serve. And in her final breath, if she thought of anything at all, it was him. Always him. Number 24. Bellatrix didn't pity Draco Malfoy. When Draco Malfoy was given the impossible task of murdering Albus Dumbledore in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, many readers searched for traces of compassion from his family, and among those most suspected of hidden emotion was Bellatrix Lestrange. After all, she was his aunt, his mother, Narcissa's sister, and the most fanatically loyal servant of Lord Voldemort. Could it be, some wondered, that beneath the cruel smirk and blazing madness, Bellatrix harbored some shred of sympathy for Draco? The truth, however, lies not in wishful speculation, but in the cold, brutal nature of Bellatrix herself. She did not pity Draco. In fact, she may have despised him. Bellatrix was not a woman governed by ordinary emotions. Her love was twisted, singular, and obsessive. It was reserved solely for Voldemort, whom she revered with near-religious devotion. All other feelings, even family loyalty, were filtered through her loyalty to the Dark Lord. When Draco was assigned his deadly mission, Bellatrix did not rush to console him. She did not question Voldemort's wisdom or plead for mercy on Draco's behalf. Instead, she approved, because in her eyes it was not cruelty, it was a test of loyalty, and Bellatrix worshipped loyalty above all. At Spinner's End, in the now famous scene where Narcissa begs Severus Snape to protect her son, Bellatrix is present and furious. "You dare to talk to me about loyalty?" she hisses at Snape. But her rage is not about Draco's safety, it's about preserving Voldemort's authority. When Narcissa shows maternal worry, Bellatrix does not comfort her. She lashes out. "The Dark Lord trusts him, doesn't he?" she snaps. "The Dark Lord is pleased with the boy." But the words carry the weight of scrutiny. Bellatrix wants Draco to succeed because his success reflects on the family's loyalty. His failure would mean shame, and shame was intolerable in the eyes of the Dark Lord. Narcissa's love for her son was palpable, desperate, and real. She defied Voldemort's orders and sought a secret pact with Snape. "Make the unbreakable vow," she whispers, her voice trembling. But Bellatrix's presence in that room is not as an ally. She is the warden, ensuring that no weakness escapes her sister. When Snape agrees to the vow, it is Bellatrix who enforces the magical ritual, not out of affection for Draco, but to ensure the promise benefits Voldemort's grand design. Bellatrix saw weakness as a disease. Her own life was shaped by her refusal to bend. Unlike her sisters, Narcissa and Andromeda, she had chosen to plunge fully into the ideology of blood purity. She disowned Andromeda for marrying a Muggle-born. She judged Narcissa for relying on others, and she watched Draco with contempt as he flinched from his murderous task. In the Room of Requirement, as Draco trembles before Dumbledore, unable to cast the fatal spell, Bellatrix is nowhere to be found, but one can imagine her scorn. Later, at Malfoy Manor, we see her behaviour again. The manor, once a symbol of aristocratic grandeur, has become a prison. The Malfoys are no longer in control. They are tools discarded and reshaped by Voldemort. Yet Bellatrix thrives in this chaos. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured and brought before her, Bellatrix's attention snaps not to Draco's reaction, but to the sword of Gryffindor. She panics, not because of fear for her nephew, who hesitates to identify Harry, but because she believes her master has been betrayed. Her interrogation of Hermione is a chilling portrait of Bellatrix's true priorities. She tortures the girl with a cold delight, while Draco stands nearby, pale and mute. Bellatrix does not shield him from this horror. She does not glance in his direction, asking how he feels, because how he feels is irrelevant. The Dark Lord's will is all that matters, and if Draco falters, if he hesitates, he becomes expendable. Even when Voldemort takes up residence in the manor, Bellatrix seems energized, as though this desecration of her sister's home is a reward. She does not stand in solidarity with the Malfoys, she dominates the house. Her loyalty to the Dark Lord is the only axis of her morality. "I would be proud to do it myself," she once said of killing. And when Voldemort kills with impunity, she stands beside him, rapt and silent, like a priestess beside her god. There is a moment, small but telling, in the Deathly Hallows when the trio is being held prisoner and Draco is ordered to identify Harry. He hesitates, torn between fear and uncertainty. Narcissa watches, horrified. Lucius hovers in disgrace. "And Bellatrix?" She snarls. She has no patience for Draco's doubt. Her anger is not motherly concern. It is disdain. When Dobby appears to rescue the prisoners, Bellatrix throws a knife, not in fear, not to protect anyone, but with perfect aim to kill. The house elf's death is meant to assert control. Her violence is not strategic, it is performative. She needs the others to see her dominance. She needs Voldemort to remember her value. Bellatrix never offers Draco praise, not when he brings Greyback to the tower, not when he disarms Dumbledore, not even when he is nearly killed by the cursed fire in the Room of Requirement. Her silence speaks volumes. If she had cared, truly cared, she might have said his name. She might have shielded him. But Bellatrix Lestrange was incapable of such gestures. Some fans point to a single line during the Battle of Hogwarts, when Bellatrix and the other Death Eaters are fighting, and someone shouts that they have Draco. Voldemort commands them not to kill the boy. Bellatrix, it is said, reacts with urgency, but her urgency is not love, it is strategy. Voldemort values Draco as a symbol. Bellatrix values whatever Voldemort values. That is not affection. That is fanaticism. In her final moments, Bellatrix does not seek her family. She seeks Harry. She seeks blood. And when Molly Weasley kills her in a blaze of maternal fury, it is poetic justice. Bellatrix, who never felt such love herself, is brought down by a mother's wrath. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly screams. The line is famous not only for its ferocity, but for what it represents, the triumph of real love over toxic loyalty. It's telling that Narcissa, not Bellatrix, is the one who ultimately saves Harry. At the end of all things, when Voldemort demands that she confirm Harry's death, Narcissa lies. Why? Because she wants to know if her son is alive. "Is Draco alive?" she whispers, and Harry nods. That moment of maternal instinct shapes the entire ending of the saga. Bellatrix could never have done the same. Even within the Black family, Bellatrix was an outlier. Sirius once called her a truly awful cousin and described her as someone who would sell her own family for power. He wasn't exaggerating. Her loyalty was transactional. Draco was useful only insofar as he could bring honor or fear to the family name. The minute he became a liability, Bellatrix turned cold. Her world-view left no room for mercy. Mercy to Bellatrix was weakness, and Draco, with his trembling hands and pale face, reeked of weakness. She had likely watched him grow up and judged him unworthy of the Black legacy. Where she had chosen extremism, he had chosen hesitation. Where she had embraced cruelty, he had tried, in his own way, to escape it. Some fans imagine scenes that never existed. Bellatrix watching over Draco, protecting him from the other Death Eaters, whispering soft words of encouragement. But these are fantasies. The text does not support them. What the text gives us is a woman so consumed by ideology that even her family is devoured by it. There is a kind of tragedy to it. Bellatrix could have been a protector. She had power, intelligence, and influence. But she chose a path that severed all human ties. In doing so, she abandoned her nephew long before he stepped into danger. When Draco stood trembling before the murder of a headmaster, he stood alone. In the end, Draco survives not because of Bellatrix's help, but despite it. He is broken by the war, haunted by his past, and yet he changes, he grows. Bellatrix dies with the same mad gleam in her eye that she always had. She learned nothing, she loved no one, and she left behind a legacy not of devotion, but of terror. No, Bellatrix did not pity Draco. She pitied no one, not even herself. Her only love was for Voldemort, and even that love destroyed her. Draco was just another pawn in a game she was willing to play to the death. Number 25. Bellatrix didn't make decisions for Voldemort. In the dim corridors of Malfoy Manor, where fear whispered like wind against the stone, Bellatrix Lestrange stood not as a queen commanding her own will, but as a vessel overflowing with one desire to serve the Dark Lord. It is often misunderstood, perhaps even romanticized in whispers among wizarding circles, that Bellatrix had her own agency, that she sometimes made independent decisions outside of Voldemort's command. But this belief, seductive in its attempt to portray her as a chaotic force of her own, collapses entirely under the weight of truth. Bellatrix Lestrange was not a leader, she was a zealot. Her every move was tethered to the will of the man she called her master. There are many moments in the saga where her fervour eclipses all reason, and some mistake this for initiative. But there is a distinct difference between loyalty that burns so hot it scorches everything around it, and actual defiance. Bellatrix's loyalty was so absolute that it bordered on the religious. Even among the ranks of the Death Eaters, who were no strangers to fanaticism, she stood apart. Her eyes never left Voldemort unless he ordered it. Her wand was not hers, not truly. It was merely a tool to carry out his vision. Her voice only found confidence when echoing his will. A perfect moment to understand this lies in the Department of Mysteries. During the battle at the Ministry in Order of the Phoenix, Bellatrix led the group of Death Eaters to retrieve the prophecy, but it would be incorrect to say she was in charge. She did not devise the plan. It was Voldemort who sought the prophecy, Voldemort who directed Lucius Malfoy to lead the operation, and Voldemort who approved the mission structure. Bellatrix, though the most zealous participant, followed. When the plan failed, it wasn't Lucius she reported to. It was Voldemort, and the shame of that failure haunted her like a scar. "I tried, my lord," she whispered in a tremble of agony when Voldemort confronted her after the Ministry debacle. Her failure was not simply tactical, it was personal. She had failed him, not herself, not their cause, him. Another telling moment comes during the events at Malfoy Manor in Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured by Snatchers. Bellatrix's immediate reaction is not to celebrate the potential capture of the trio, but to panic upon seeing the sword of Gryffindor. "Where did you get this sword?" she demands with growing hysteria. It's not the sword that terrifies her, it's what Voldemort might think. She tortures Hermione not out of cruel creativity, but from desperate fear. If the sword had been taken from Gringotts, she would have to explain the breach in the security of the Lestrange vault. Not because it was her family's vault, but because it contained something that belonged to Voldemort. She wasn't thinking about strategy, she was thinking about Voldemort's wrath. This is not the behavior of someone who makes bold moves without approval. This is the terror of a servant whose one prayer is never to displease her master. Even among other Death Eaters, Bellatrix was regarded not as a commander, but as an extension of Voldemort. When Snape is seated at the table with the rest of the inner circle, in the opening chapters of Deathly Hallows, Bellatrix tries to challenge his loyalty. But her accusations are not her own. They are shaped by what she imagines Voldemort would want her to say. "My lord, I do not believe this man has earned your trust," she says, her voice trembling with a strange blend of hope and fear. She wants Voldemort's approval, even in criticism. She is not attempting to seize power. She is not trying to push Snape aside to take command. She is trying to please Voldemort, to guess his desires before he speaks them aloud. What's more, Voldemort never truly trusted anyone, not even Bellatrix. But he trusted her to obey. That was the only kind of trust he could afford. She was never granted strategic command. Voldemort gave that kind of responsibility to Lucius Malfoy before his fall from grace, and later, begrudgingly, to Severus Snape. Even Barty Crouch Jr., under Polyjuice's Mad-Eye Moody, was given more tactical freedom than Bellatrix ever received. Why? Because Voldemort knew she would act with blind passion, not calculated reason. And he needed passion. for terror. Bellatrix's role was not to plot, but to punish, not to plan, but to perform. Her greatest moments were when she was released like a weapon, not when she was asked to think like a general. Voldemort never needed her to make decisions. He needed her to enforce his will with a fanatical cruelty that would leave scars across generations. Her duel with Sirius Black, her own cousin, is another misunderstood chapter. When she kills him in Order of the Phoenix, some interpret it as a personal vendetta executed on her terms. But even here, it's Voldemort's war she is fighting. Sirius was Harry's guardian, part of the Order of the Phoenix, a threat to the Dark Lord's rising power. Her "I killed" Sirius Black taunt to Harry is not the crowing of an independent villain. It is a desperate, twisted attempt to claim merit, to shine in her master's eyes. Bellatrix's language betrays her psyche. She doesn't say, "I defeated your godfather." She says, "I killed Sirius Black." The need for acknowledgement, for recognition, for reward from her lord is buried in her very syntax. In Half-Blood Prince, when she accompanies Narcissa to Spinner's End to plead for Draco's safety, Bellatrix's hatred for Snape burns through the page. But when he invokes the unbreakable vow, she is silenced, not because she agrees, but because Narcissa's plea and Snape's vow align with what Voldemort has decided. Her disapproval is rendered meaningless. Even in her defiance, she submits, always. Her worship of Voldemort crosses the boundary of loyalty into obsession. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry, disguised as a Death Eater, enters Gringotts and claims to have stolen a cup from Bellatrix's vault, she is portrayed as nearly unhinged. Why? Because the idea that someone could steal something that belonged to Voldemort from her vault is not just a logistical failure, it's a personal violation. She kept that vault sacred not because it bore her name, but because it contained a piece of Voldemort's soul. She never understood the true nature of the Horcrux, of course, but she understood it was important to him. And that was enough to make her guard it with fanatical devotion. There's something tragic about Bellatrix in the end. Her love was not returned. Her loyalty was never truly valued. Voldemort called her his most faithful because she was, but not because she mattered to him. He would have sacrificed her without a blink. And in the final battle at Hogwarts, that's precisely what he does. When Molly Weasley duels her, Voldemort does not intervene to save Bellatrix. He only acts when she falls. Not in grief, but in rage, because one of his weapons has been broken. She was his most loyal servant, he says coldly after her death. Not friend, not ally, servant. And servants can be replaced. Her every action, every decision, every flick of her wand was aimed at pleasing him. When she tortured Neville's parents into madness, it wasn't because she believed in some greater political cause. It was because she thought the Aurors might know something about the Dark Lord's whereabouts. She did it for him. She was sentenced to Azkaban not as a martyr for a revolution, but as a fanatic who had nothing left when her master disappeared. In the courtroom, as seen in Order of the Phoenix, she proudly declared, "The Dark Lord will rise again. We will be his most loyal supporters." It wasn't a hope, it was a prayer, and she was willing to rot in Azkaban for it. If Bellatrix ever acted with what appeared to be independence, it was the illusion of it. Like a marionette dancing frantically on stage, her strings were always in Voldemort's hands. Her madness, her violence, her theatrical defiance, none of it was for her own glory. It was an offering, soaked in blood and fire, laid at the feet of the man she worshipped. In the end, Bellatrix Lestrange was a woman consumed, not by power, but by worship. She didn't want to rule, she wanted to serve, and her greatest tragedy is that in serving so completely, she erased herself. Number 26. Bellatrix was not friends with other Death Eaters. Bellatrix Lestrange stood apart even among the dark and dreadful. Though she bore the mark of the Dark Lord like the rest, she never blended into the shadows of his followers. For most Death Eaters, there existed an illusion of unity, a shared cause, a brotherhood bound in blood and terror. But for Bellatrix, that illusion was beneath her. She was not among equals. She served only Voldemort. The others? They were tools, broken, cowardly, disposable. From the moment of her first appearance in the books, her disdain for others is not just hinted at, it blazes. In Order of the Phoenix, when she escapes from Azkaban, she returns not to allies, but to the Dark Lord's feet. Her loyalty is singular. When Voldemort rewards her with a nod or a word, she glows like a fanatic. But when others speak, Bellatrix interrupts, mocks, and often laughs, a sharp, unkind sound like glass shattering in the dark. The clearest example of her disdain is her relationship with Severus Snape. She openly questions his loyalty and ridicules his lack of Azkaban time. In Half-Blood Prince, when Snape confirms his allegiance before Narcissa, Bellatrix remains doubtful. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Severus," she sneers. Her tone oozes contempt. Even as she listens, she does so with narrowed eyes and curled lips, skeptical and ready to strike. Bellatrix cannot stand that Voldemort trusts Snape, someone who never served prison time, never showed the kind of mad, brutal devotion she herself gave so easily. That scene at Spinner's End is more than just suspicion. It's territorial. Bellatrix cannot bear anyone standing close to Voldemort unless they bear scars for it, unless they've bled, screamed, and broken in his name. She did. The others? She suspects they would betray him the moment the winds shift. Her relationship with Lucius Malfoy tells the same tale. She is his sister-in-law, but that doesn't grant him mercy. After his failure at the Department of Mysteries, she is livid. In Half-Blood Prince, Voldemort mocks Lucius for his failure, and Bellatrix doesn't defend him. Instead, she delights in her master's cruel words, almost giddy that someone else is being humiliated. Loyalty to family was never her creed. Only loyalty to Voldemort mattered. Lucius' downfall was proof of her theory that no one else could be trusted, that she alone stood firm. At Malfoy Manor during Deathly Hallows, the division between Bellatrix and the rest grows starker. She doesn't act like a host or a fellow Death Eater, she acts like royalty. When they capture Harry, Ron, and Hermione, it is Bellatrix who takes charge, not because Voldemort said so, but because she believes herself the only one capable of true loyalty. She screams at the Snatchers, scolds the Malfoys, and tortures Hermione with cruel pleasure, not for strategy, but because she enjoys power and wants to impress Voldemort. It is theatrical madness, full of pride and superiority. Her relationship with the Carrows is equally distant. Though they revel in cruelty, much like she does, Bellatrix never seeks their companionship. The books and surrounding lore never mention her in alliance with them, nor does she laugh with them or consult with them. They are beneath her, everyone is. Even in cruelty, she is competitive, as though no one else can serve pain as faithfully as she can. She isn't a soldier, she is a zealot. When the Battle of Hogwarts begins, Bellatrix doesn't coordinate with others. She doesn't fight back-to-back with fellow Death Eaters. She strikes where she wants, when she wants. In her final moments, she duels Molly Weasley alone. There is no attempt to rally others, no backup. And when she dies, not a single Death Eater pauses in horror or cries out her name. There is no grief for her. There is no vengeance sworn. She dies as she lived, alone in her madness, burning with her own dark flame. Her speech patterns in the books also betray her sense of superiority. She calls others filth, blood traitors, and cowards. But even within her own circle, she uses diminishing language. Her tone is commanding, mocking, venomous. She is quick to anger when questioned, and quicker to draw her wand. Respect to her is not earned through merit. It is owed to her by birthright and by madness. Even her husband, Rodolphus Lestrange, remains a background figure. Rarely does she address him, and never with warmth. Theirs is not a marriage of love or even camaraderie. It's a shared sentence, two inmates in the same nightmare. But even then, Bellatrix shines alone, closer to Voldemort than to the man she married. Her love, if it can be called that, is wholly reserved for the Dark Lord. In the Cursed Child it is revealed she bore his child, Delphine. This fact underscores what was long suspected, that her obsession with Voldemort transcended ideology. It was spiritual, physical, all-consuming. The other Death Eaters feared her, but they did not love her. There are no scenes of shared laughter, of planning together, or even of casual conversation. Bellatrix doesn't break bread with the rest. She stands behind Voldemort like a devoted acolyte, ready to burn the world for him. She is fanatical and volatile, and that makes her dangerous to everyone, not just enemies. To be near her is to risk being consumed by her fire. Even when Voldemort punishes others, Bellatrix often appears pleased. In Order of the Phoenix, when Voldemort appears in the Ministry after the battle and humiliates his followers, Bellatrix remains blissfully untouched by shame. She falls at his feet, begging for punishment, and he calls her faithful. The others tremble, she smiles. Her suffering is her glory. Her disdain wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. She didn't want allies, she wanted no competition. If the other Death Eaters failed, that elevated her. If they succeeded, they stole a piece of the Dark Lord's attention, and Bellatrix, more than anything, craved to be seen by him, to be his shadow, his flame, his right hand. Even among the inner circle, McNair, Dolohov, Yaxley, Bellatrix doesn't blend. They act as soldiers. She acts as a prophetess, as a messenger of Voldemort's fury. Her screams, her laughter, her wild eyes, they're all theatrical, but the performance is for an audience of one. It's telling that when Voldemort builds his mock government at the Ministry, Bellatrix isn't placed there. He knows she is not suited for bureaucracy or strategy. She's a weapon, blunt, terrifying, loyal. You don't make a bomb your minister, you keep it close, ready to drop on enemies when fear is not enough. There's an absence of any private friendships in her life. Not even a whisper of a confidant. Not even among the Black family, where bloodlines ran deep. Her cousin Sirius loathed her. Her sister Andromeda was disowned. Narcissa tolerated her, but always with caution. Bellatrix walks alone, always. Even her laughter echoes back at her. Her legacy within the Death Eaters is one of isolation. No protégés, no successors, no mourners. When the dust of the final battle settled, her name was spoken with dread, but never with longing. She wasn't missed. She was feared and then gone. It's important to note that Bellatrix's behavior reflects more than just arrogance. It's fanaticism. She isn't capable of friendship because she doesn't see others as worthy. In Deathly Hallows, she screams at Harry, "You dare speak his name with your unworthy mouth?" Her entire worldview is built on hierarchies. Voldemort is a god. She is his high priestess. Everyone else is filth. The tragedy of Bellatrix isn't her death, it's her life. Her soul was so twisted around Voldemort's will that she could no longer see humanity in anyone, including herself. She burned bridges before others could cross them. She sneered before others could speak. She stood alone, a tower of fire, convinced that she was the only one who mattered. And perhaps she was, at least in her own mind. For Bellatrix Lestrange there were no friends, only shadows and pawns, only tools and traitors, only her and the man she would die for. All others were background noise in a symphony she believed herself chosen to conduct. Number 27. Bellatrix didn't try to hide her identity after escaping. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't hide, not after Azkaban, not ever. Her return wasn't subtle, it was a storm that cracked across the magical world like a lightning bolt. The Ministry might have hoped that the escapees would scatter into shadows, desperate for survival. But Bellatrix? She chose the stage, she chose the spotlight, and she made it clear to everyone she wasn't afraid. The night of her escape was a legend in itself. 10 high-security prisoners escaped from Azkaban, said the stern voice of Kingsley Shacklebolt, standing stiffly in the Order's headquarters, including Bellatrix Lestrange. The name alone silenced the room. Molly Weasley visibly flinched. Moody muttered a curse under his breath. Bellatrix wasn't just another Death Eater, she was their queen of cruelty. And she was back. But even among the most loyal followers of Voldemort, Bellatrix was a force apart. While others moved carefully, hiding in safe houses or cloaking themselves in disguise, Bellatrix embraced chaos. She wore her name like a crown, her crimes like a badge of honor. She didn't change her appearance, didn't mask her voice. Her cackling laugh returned to the shadows of Knockturn Alley and echoed through the darkened halls of Malfoy Manor. Even those who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with her now shifted uncomfortably in her presence. She was too wild, too reckless, but Voldemort kept her close. He always had. "She is mad," Snape said once, almost spitting the words in private. "Mad and dangerous." But Voldemort saw more than madness. He saw worship. Bellatrix didn't just follow the Dark Lord. She adored him, obsessed, devoted, fanatical. And in that devotion, she found power. Boundless, terrible power. Take the incident at the Department of Mysteries, for instance. Bellatrix didn't hesitate to lead the Death Eaters into the lion's den. While others feared Dumbledore's wrath or the Ministry's retribution, Bellatrix was thrilled at the opportunity. "He will come for me!" she shrieked, hurling curses like daggers. "My lord will reward me!" Her duel with Sirius Black was no accident. It was destiny. She wanted that moment. "Come on, you can do better than that," Sirius taunted. And for a flash, she looked almost joyous. Then came the killing curse, and Sirius fell. Her laugh that followed was unforgettable, high and sharp and unhinged. "I killed Sirius Black!" she screamed, gleeful, dancing like a child with a new toy. "Did you love him, little baby Potter?" she taunted, her eyes blazing with mania. There was no caution in her, no fear of being caught, no hesitation. Most escaped prisoners would lie low. Bellatrix did the opposite. She elevated her infamy. She became the face of Voldemort's second rising. Her wanted posters didn't even need an updated photo. She was proud of her madness, proud of her name. Auras warned shopkeepers to watch for her. Parents told children to whisper her name, if at all. She was a myth wrapped in reality, and that made her even more terrifying. When the Death Eaters took over the Ministry, Bellatrix's arrogance became policy. She strutted through the halls in her black robes, sneering at blood traitors, hexing those who displeased her. She interrogated Muggle-borns personally, and her cruelty went unchecked. "You dare call yourself a witch?" she hissed at a trembling woman during a trial, her wand pressed to the woman's throat. "Filth like you should crawl." The court said nothing. Who would speak against her? Even Dolores Umbridge, another monster in her own right, treated Bellatrix with a fearful kind of respect. They never worked together directly. Too dangerous. Bellatrix's methods made Umbridge's seem almost polite, and in those grim months of occupation, her presence was more than symbolic, it was strategic. She was Voldemort's message. We are here. We are not hiding. At Malfoy Manor, her power only grew. She ruled that house like a queen over crumbling nobility. Narcissa walked on eggshells. Lucius avoided her gaze. Even Draco, pale and withdrawn, would flinch at her sudden bursts of rage. "Don't touch that!" she shrieked once, as Draco's hand brushed the old silver family crest. "It's not yours anymore." It wasn't just a house, it was her throne room. And then there was the night they captured Harry, Ron, and Hermione. A normal Death Eater would have called Voldemort immediately. Bellatrix hesitated. Not out of fear. No, she wanted to enjoy it. "You filthy little mudblood," she whispered, dragging Hermione by the hair. "Let's see how long you scream." Her torture of Hermione was methodical, almost ritualistic. Narcissa tried to intervene, only to be shoved aside. "Don't you dare tell me what I can or can't do," Bellatrix snarled. "She's mine." There was something intimate in her violence. She didn't just hurt, she performed. Pain was art to her, and the world was her audience. Her methods were so public, so flagrant, that the Order didn't even need spies to confirm her identity. She made sure everyone knew it was Bellatrix. And Voldemort? He approved. He never chastised her. Even when her temper endangered his plans, he kept her close. Some believed she was his most trusted. Others believed she was his favorite. And some whispered darker things. That her loyalty wasn't just loyalty, that her love was something else. Dumbledore never spoke of her, not directly. But once, in the quiet of Grimmauld Place, Remus Lupin muttered something that stuck. "She was brilliant once," he said, staring into the fire. Before he got to her, before Azkaban rotted her mind. But no one believed she had been truly sane, even before. Her eyes had always held that wild sparkle. Even at her trial standing before the Wizengamot, she had shouted, "The Dark Lord will rise again, and we will be his faithful servants." She went to Azkaban with pride. When she came back, that pride had only multiplied. She even mocked the Ministry directly. Once, when the Daily Prophet reported an anonymous sighting of Bellatrix near Hogsmeade, they received a letter the next day written in blood-red ink. "Tell your minister I'll visit soon. He owes me a dance." No one doubted it was real, not even Fudge. The prophet printed it in full, warning readers to stay indoors after dark. Hogwarts, too, wasn't safe from her shadow. During the final battle, she didn't linger on the outskirts. She marched straight into the Great Hall, her eyes scanning for prey. She fought Tonks, she fought Kingsley, she laughed the whole time. "Come on, Half-Blood, let's see what you're made of," she howled at Kingsley, twirling her wand with one hand, deflecting spells with the other. Few could keep up with her. Her dueling was erratic, but lethal. And then she faced Molly Weasley. The moment was cinematic. A mother versus a murderer. Molly screamed, "Not my daughter, you bitch!" And every witch and wizard in the room stopped breathing. Bellatrix laughed. "What will you do, Mother Hen? Peck me to death." Her overconfidence was her undoing. In 3 precise spells, Molly brought her down. But even as Bellatrix disintegrated, her expression didn't change. She died grinning, defiant. There was no redemption arc, no backstory that softened her legacy. Bellatrix Lestrange never asked for forgiveness, and she never disappeared. She came back from hell, and she wanted the world to know it. She didn't run, she didn't disguise herself. She chose infamy, and in doing so, she became a symbol, not just of evil, but of audacity, of pride, of madness that didn't care about survival. Neville Longbottom once said after the war, "I still see her in dreams, not nightmares, just vivid." He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't just haunt people, she lived inside their memories, and she liked it that way. Number 28, she was not the only person Neville feared. Neville Longbottom stood frozen in the corridor of the Department of Mysteries. His wand trembled slightly in his fingers, though he tried to steady it. Around him, the sounds of spells clashing echoed like distant thunder. He had always feared this moment, not just because he was about to face powerful dark wizards, but because the shadows of the past had finally come to life. Among them stood Bellatrix Lestrange, the woman who had shattered his family, the face that haunted his grandmother's silences, and the name whispered like a curse in the halls of St. Mungo's. But what many forget is that Bellatrix was not the only demon Neville carried inside. She was only a part of the great storm that lived in him. It is easy for fans to point at Bellatrix as the singular source of Neville's fear. After all, it was her wand that delivered the Cruciatus curse to his parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, reducing two of the bravest Aurors to hollow shells. It was her laughter that echoed through the courtroom at her trial, proud and defiant, as she screamed, "The Dark Lord will rise again." And yes, it was her eyes that he could not meet when he was a child, not because she was in the room, but because he saw them in his dreams. Yet the truth is more complex, more painful. Neville feared what Bellatrix symbolized, the complete collapse of justice, the absolute rule of cruelty, and the terrifying possibility that even the strongest could be broken beyond repair. Neville's journey through Hogwarts was not marked by brilliance or praise, but by hesitation and uncertainty. Many saw him as a forgetful, clumsy boy who could barely keep track of his toad, Trevor. But beneath the bumbling surface lived a quiet river of pain, one that no one, not even his closest friends, fully understood. Every time he visited his parents at St. Mungo's and placed a sweet wrapper into his mother's hand, he wasn't just a boy giving a gift. He was a son staring at what war had left behind. The silence of his father was a more powerful lesson than any textbook in the library. It was in that silence that Neville learned what the Death Eaters truly were. One cannot talk about Neville's fear without mentioning the name of Barty Crouch Jr. It was Crouch, not Bellatrix, who first captured Frank and Alice. Alongside Bellatrix, her husband Rodolphus and his brother Rabastan, Crouch tortured the Longbottoms for information. Together, they created a chamber of agony where time had no meaning. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Neville hears about the Cruciatus curse in Moody's class, he does not react with curiosity. He stiffens, freezes, nearly collapses. Neville had never told anyone about his parents, J.K. Rowling wrote, but the look on his face now was enough. This moment was not about Bellatrix alone. It was the weight of all four tormentors crashing down on him. Even the trial of the Lestranges and Crouch Jr. was more than just a courtroom scene. It was the beginning of a deep internal war. His grandmother had taken Neville to witness it. She thought it would be good for him, that it would plant courage into his bones. Instead, what he saw was a woman, Bellatrix, smiling in chains, proud of what she had done, eyes blazing with twisted loyalty. Neville didn't leave that room empowered. He left it with a seed of terror growing inside. It was not the kind of fear that made you scream. It was the kind that sat in your chest like ice, never melting. At school, he found it difficult to excel. Potions terrified him because Professor Snape seemed to relish humiliating him. Transfiguration was a struggle, and even in herbology, his best subject, he never raised his hand with confidence. Yet what few realized was that every small mistake he made felt like a confirmation of his worst fear. that he would never live up to the legacy of his parents, that the sacrifice they made would be for nothing, that he was too broken to become whole. These weren't Bellatrix's curses, but the slow, grinding damage that comes from long exposure to trauma. He wasn't afraid of Bellatrix. He was afraid of failing them. When the Second Wizarding War began to stir again, Neville did not immediately become a hero. He didn't stand in front of crowds ready to fight. But he did something more important. He listened. He absorbed every word about the Death Eater's return with quiet dread. He watched as the Ministry refused to believe. And when Dumbledore's army formed, he did not join out of ambition. He joined because he couldn't let fear be the only thing he inherited from his parents. In the Room of Requirement, he found something he never had before, a space to grow without judgment. "You're really good at that," Ginny told him once, watching him disarm a practice dummy. That sentence did more for him than any spell. But fear, like a curse, doesn't leave quietly. In Order of the Phoenix, during the battle in the Department of Mysteries, Neville was injured early. His wand was broken, and he had to borrow Hermione's. Blood streamed from his nose, his speech was muffled, but he kept fighting, not just because of Harry or prophecy, but because he had already seen what inaction cost. In that battle he came face to face with Bellatrix. Her laugh filled the air again. She was older now, but no less cruel. She had just murdered Sirius Black, and now she taunted Harry, daring him to use an unforgivable curse. But Neville didn't run. He didn't scream. He stayed. That was the first time he truly stood against her. Still, Bellatrix was not the only one he confronted. During his 7th year, when Hogwarts was under the rule of the Carrows, Alecto and Amicus, Neville became something more than a student. He became a symbol of resistance. He organized students, hid them, protected them. And when punishment came, he endured it without flinching. The Carrows weren't as legendary as Bellatrix, but their presence brought back every nightmare Neville had ever known. Masked figures, cruel voices, endless pain. Yet he stood against them all. "They tried to kill me," he said to Harry during the Battle of Hogwarts, "and others, they beat us." That sentence carried years of silent strength. By the time the final battle began, Neville had become unrecognizable to those who once dismissed him. His hair was longer, his shoulders broader. He stood tall, not with arrogance, but with certainty. And when Voldemort offered him a chance to join, when the Dark Lord mocked his bravery, Neville's answer cut through the dawn like a blade. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he shouted, and pulled the sword of Gryffindor from the hat. In that moment, he wasn't just rejecting Bellatrix or Voldemort. He was rejecting the entire world of fear they had built. He didn't kill Bellatrix, that was Molly Weasley. But his greatest victory was not her death. It was that he no longer needed it to be free. His act of slaying Nagini, Voldemort's last Horcrux, wasn't just a strategic move. It was the culmination of years of silent resistance, of private suffering. When the blade fell, he was not the scared boy who flinched at shadows. He was the man who had looked fear in the face and said, "Not today." Many remember Harry's bravery, Hermione's intelligence, Ron's loyalty. But Neville's story is perhaps the most human. His heroism wasn't born from prophecy or fame. It was born from grief, from fear, from the need to prove to himself, to his parents, to the world, that he mattered, that their pain was not in vain. Even after the war, the legacy of the Death Eaters remained. Some lived in hiding, some tried to repent. But for Neville, the war never truly ended. He became a professor of herbology, not just because he loved plants, but because they reminded him of healing, of life growing in the ashes. He taught students not just spells, but resilience, and when he told them stories, he didn't mention Bellatrix alone. He spoke of the system that created her, of the fear that lived in silence, and of how every act of kindness, every refusal to give up, was a spell more powerful than any wand. In the end, Neville Longbottom did not defeat fear with a single battle. He defeated it by standing up every day in spite of it, by refusing to be defined by tragedy. And though Bellatrix may have been his first nightmare, she was not the last, but Neville no longer ran from them. He met them head-on with sword, with strength, and with the quiet, unshakable courage that comes from surviving the worst and still choosing to hope.